So, the point of my talk is about hacking for good. And that is, how do we make our hackathons more socially impactful? And I'm going to start by talking a little bit about myself, of course. So, I'm currently the co-director of Hack for Impact, which is a student organization dedicated to building technology for nonprofits. So we have about 20 developers, and every week they devote 10 hours a week to coding for all sorts of different nonprofits in the Philadelphia and national area. They basically come from healthcare, poverty alleviance, food accessibility, all sorts of things. And so we've been running this organization, me and Ali is over there. And we've learned a lot of things about working with nonprofits. It's a pretty interesting space. I think there's a big need for it, and I'm excited to share with you kind of what we can do specifically for hackathons. Other stuff is I've been an organizer. I've helped with Penn Apps. I've worked with a lot of nonprofits, and I'm currently a senior at the University of Pennsylvania. So the first thing to do is talk about, is this worth talking about? A lot of people think that hackathons should just be focused on the hacking. They think it should be all about building and coding and not worrying about what happens after. But I think what we've seen is that there's kind of a lot of different kinds of people coming to hackathons. Now you have entrepreneurs who want to start companies. You have designers who want to build like amazingly artistic works, and we also see people who are very interested in solving these huge humanitarian efforts. Every single hackathon now, we see a lot of people building things for healthcare. We see a lot of people building things for homeless shelters. Just recently at Penn Apps, I saw a hack that allows you to Postmates any good to a homeless shelter. It's pretty awesome. And when Ali and I started the organization, Hack for Impact, we weren't sure whether people would really care. We weren't sure if developers would want to spend all this time working for free for these nonprofits. We thought they might just want to work on their own projects. And we put out this survey. We asked if anyone wanted to join this club, and 90 people at Penn applied. And we thought, wow, we're kind of onto something. And as we started doing a little bit of research, we saw that a lot of other people were doing this too. All these hackathons had sprouted up. We had Hack Duke, the social good hackathon. We had something at NYU, Penn Apps Health Initiative, Hacking for Something Better. Even Google had a Hack for Humanity, and there's all these city-wide hackathons that are kind of starting. And in addition to these hackathons, there's all these pretty cool organizations that started, similar to Hack for Impact. There's at UC Berkeley, there's Blueprint, MIT has a Code for Good initiative, and there's #charity. So it seems like hackers actually want to make a difference. These are the humanitarian hackers that we're catering towards. And the question is, how can we as organizers actually enable them to do that? So I'm going to start by talking about a vision for hackathons. Swift talked about how this is just the beginning of the hackathon movement and how so many changes are going to be made. Maybe the format's going to change. And I'm going to present a vision for another type of hackathon. And that is hackathons as a launching pad for social innovation. I want you to imagine that in the future, hackathons aren't just for the tech industry, they're for everybody. Imagine that one day we have a team where there's 2 or 3 hackers, there's a couple teachers, there's a school administrator, and in the span of 48 hours, they build the prototype that becomes the next Clever. And Clever is, of course, the educational platform that 1/5 of all schools in the US are using now. What if they build the prototype that becomes the next Khan Academy? It can be for other spaces too. You can have healthcare. You can have a couple hackers working with a couple oncologists, and they build the next Flatiron Health or the next Medic Mobile. But you get the idea. Basically, the idea is we don't want hackathons just to be something exciting for hackers. We want the government to be excited about hackathons. We want doctors, teachers to be excited about hackathons. It can be a place where everybody kind of comes together and actually starts tackling some of the biggest problems that humanity is facing. I think that's an amazing vision for hackathons, and I think we can actually reach there. But first, we need to talk about what hackathons are currently. And what I'd say is currently, hackathons are not exactly optimized for social impact. And I'm going to tell you a little bit of like a story that some of you guys might be familiar with. It's probably an experience that you share if you've ever been to a hackathon and have thought about building something for some sort of social good initiative. So when I went to my first social good hackathon, it went something like this. We showed up, and there were a bunch of nonprofits, and they gave us these speeches about, these are the challenges that we're facing. But these challenges were kind of vague. It was kind of like, oh, we need a way to communicate with the homeless. Can you build something? Or, can you figure out a way for us to deliver things more efficiently? And it's really vague. The nonprofits didn't really have a good understanding of what tech was capable of. They didn't understand what the hackers were really there to do. And after about 2 hours of all these presentations, all the nonprofit people left, and the hackers decided, okay, well, these challenges, these brief challenges that people posted weren't really that great. Let's just come up with our own ideas. So me and my friends sat around a table for about 4 hours, and we were trying to come up with something for education, and we just didn't know what to build. And I just thought to myself, what if there was just a teacher here who could just tell us, what's hard about being a teacher? What if there was a doctor here who could tell us what's hard about being a doctor? All of these things are currently not happening because the hackathon space is currently only for hackers, and I think that's something that can change. Other things I noticed, there's basically two things. It's the people and the mindset that I think need to change. So the first is, as I mentioned, the people. So the nonprofits provide these brief challenges that are often not enough. They're not really spec'd out. They're not catered towards tech people. They're brief. And then you have teams composed solely of hackers and comp sci students. And some initiatives have started. At PennApps this year, we had a booth for the PennApps Health booth, and you can kind of go up there and show them your app and ask for any feedback. And that was a good start. But I think, as an advisory role, it's not enough. If they're actually participating, they can drive a lot more development. And the other thing is the mindset. So right now, projects only last 24 to 48 hours. You work on them for the duration of the hackathon, this one-time event. Which is great. It's great to have people dedicating this much time to one specific problem. But if you think about it, people dedicate their entire lives to solving education problems. People gain this expertise after decades of work in it, and a hackathon project won't be able to solve a problem in 24 to 40 hours. The second thing, and this might be an experience you guys are familiar with, you finish working at a hackathon project, and you make plans with your team, and you say, all right, we're going to move this forward. Let's meet next week, and we'll dive back into the code base. And then a week kind of rolls around, and you look at the code, and it's like the shittiest code you've ever written, and you just don't really want to look at it again, and the meeting doesn't really happen, and then it just kind of falls into your GitHub graveyard of cool projects that I did once at a hackathon. And I think the last problem is that simple social impact projects often don't get rewarded. Sometimes nonprofits just need a simple database app. Sometimes they need a simple way just to search through their documents. But the things that win are usually these flashy things that are using the newest hardware, whether it's an Arduino or a Mayo or some sort of iWatch. But that's not necessarily social impact. Yes, it's cool. Yes, it's something that could be used in the future, but that's not necessarily what we're going for. So let's talk about the solution. What can we do about this? And I think it's about the people and the mindset. And I think I'm going to start by telling you guys a little bit about Benjamin Franklin. So Benjamin Franklin, obviously one of the greatest leaders of our country, did a lot of shit. He had this concept called a junto. And he started this when he was 20. And a junto was basically his group of friends. And he would solicit a doctor, a blacksmith, a lawyer, a firefighter, and they'd all sit around a circle every couple weeks. And they'd kind of chip away at their vision of what they thought the world should be like. And the reason this was so successful for him, because he got every single perspective on the table. When they were trying to think about what the library system should look like, they got perspectives from people of every single type of organization, and they could create that system. And I think the junto is a great model for what I think hackathons should be in the future. So the first point is create very diverse teams with experts on the team. So if you think about the greatest social impact tech companies that exist right now, it's never composed of just hackers. Khan Academy, they were successful because they have a ton of teachers on their team. They have pedagogical experts. Sal Khan is a great guy, but he needs a whole team to make this happen. Similarly, Clever was founded by someone who was at TFA, and he partnered up with someone who was a tech person. They had the expertise together to leverage their insights. Flatiron Health is a team that's based out of New York, and they have a ton of oncologists on the team. Medic Mobile and Ushahidi, which are both open source social impact initiatives, are basically built upon the work of a lot of different people in a lot of different industries. So in order to do this with hackathons, we kind of need to follow their lead. We need to build really diverse teams. And let's say, maybe it's not possible. Maybe right now we're not at the point where we can get, every single doctor at the hospital to commit to a hackathon. Sure, it's a lot of time. Maybe doctors aren't willing to do that. We can still turn to nonprofits, and that's what we're doing at Hack for Impact. We're working with nonprofits to really guide what we should be building. But I think the way we choose nonprofits needs a little bit of work as well. So when you choose the right nonprofits, you need to make sure they have the right challenges. And so I'll give you a few examples of nonprofit characteristics that are who you want to work with. The first is you want nonprofits that are slightly large. You want the nonprofits that have some sort of infrastructure, that have access to data, that actually have a lot of ideas beyond their current focus. You also want technical people at the nonprofit. So maybe you don't need a team of engineers, but maybe one tech administrator, maybe someone who understands technology, has built websites to a basic extent so that they know that when they're talking to hackers and developers, they can say, yes, we want a database. We want to be able to search this. We want an iPhone app. We want a web app. Nonprofits need to know the differences between these in order for us to be able to help them. Generally, having a younger team helps. Younger people are just more in tune with what social media can do and what social networks can do. And then finally, the most important thing is the time to commit. Having these nonprofits show up for a couple hours at the hackathon isn't really going to do anything. You really need them to be part of the team, driving the insights, and maybe even coming up with some of the ideas. That'll help guide the developers in terms of what to do. I'm not saying that they should be managing the developers. They shouldn't be telling the developers what to do. But at the same time, they have this expertise that developers can leverage. And in terms of how they describe their challenges, let's say you bring in a nonprofit and they write a brief summary of what the challenge should be. You want the challenge to be a real need that the nonprofit faces, something that if the hackathon team were to build it, the nonprofit would start using it immediately. That's incredibly motivating and it's incredibly useful. You want the challenge to be specific, and you want it to be based on the actual systems and processes in place. So if you're trying to solve a problem in Pittsburgh in the homeless shelters, the nonprofit should explain how homeless shelters in Pittsburgh are set up. They shouldn't just talk about a generic homeless shelter. That'll help you actually build towards the people, human-centered design. So with Hack for Impact, we got a chance to work with Kiva.org this last semester, and I wanted to talk a little bit about how that project worked. So as you know, Kiva is pretty much one of the best examples of a nonprofit tech company. They're a microfinance organization with a great online portal for you to make loans. So Kiva has an engineering team, but they realized that they wanted to try this new initiative and they didn't have the resources to build a prototype. They didn't have the resources to build the MVP for it. And they came to us and said, look, we want to create a portal that allows all these MBA students and people external to Kiva to help out with accepting or declining loans. We get too many loan applications and we can't actually look through all of them. So can you make some sort of application that can help us out? Can this be some sort of crowdsourcing application? And we said, sure, do you have any more specifics? And as you can see here, they kind of made a spec for us. They gave us 4 or 5 different big chunks of things that they wanted accomplished. And it wasn't specific enough that it told us exactly what to do, but it gave us the right idea, and it allowed us to build a product that solved this cool new need. I think Kiva is obviously not a typical nonprofit. Most nonprofits aren't going to have engineering teams, and they're not going to have a developer who knows what Node and Ruby is. But you want nonprofits that understand this kind of stuff, because then we can build and actually have them use the product after we're done building. So the second point is we want to change the mindset. And currently, the mindset of hackathons is that we build in 24 to 48 hours, and that's it. It's an event. And I think we want to start thinking about social impact as a more long-term goal for these hackathons. So obviously, social impact isn't going to happen in 24 to 48 hours. So how can we incentivize developers to continue working on projects after they finish the hackathon? Right now, there's nothing really in place. You know, there's a few accelerators here and there, but there's nothing really in place that says, hey, developers, after you finish this hackathon, keep going. And there's a couple ideas that I had, and I'm obviously excited to hear about the ideas that you have. But the first is some sort of social impact fellowship or accelerator. And what I'm envisioning is that we have organizations like Google.org or Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that can be at these hackathons, and they scout for projects that have a lot of potential. They'll look at them at the end of the hackathon, they'll pick individual people and say, hey, look, if you guys continue working on this, we'll give you the resources. We'll give you connections to actual users. We'll give you the junto that you need to make this product actually impactful and successful. I think something like this would not only increase the value of developers working on social impact products, but also increase the amount of social impact products being built. And in addition, I think there should be some sort of focus on longer term prizes. So right now, the prizes are all focused for when you finish the hackathon, but what about someone who starts a project at a hackathon and finishes it maybe 5 weeks later at the end of the hackathon season, and now he has a product that's being used by thousands of people across the country? We should reward people for doing that. I think there's a lot of ways we can do that, whether it's points offered by Major League Hacking or recognition or some sort of magazine or award that we give out at the end of the semester, at the end of the summer. These are things that we can easily do to incentivize people to continue working on their projects long term. So I'm going to end by talking about an example. So Ben Sandler is a member of Hack for Impact, and when he first came to Penn Apps, he thought, I want to build something that'll help the blind. And he developed this product that would basically allow a blind person to put on Google Glass, and basically you can look at different things, and Google Glass will tell you what object you're looking at. It seems like a pretty simple idea, but what he realized was as he built it and tested it and started speaking to people who were actually blind, this was revolutionary. It would be very helpful. And what's interesting about this project is that he didn't stop after the hackathon was done. He started talking to people from different organizations that catered to people who are blind, the National Foundation for Blind. And the development continued. He's getting press, he's getting traction, he's attracting people, other developers to come work on his project. And I think this is a perfect example of what we want hackathons to do. We want to enable this. We want all social impact projects to have this kind of momentum, this kind of ability to make an impact. And I think we as organizers can actually make that happen. So I guess the last thing I'd want to say is for those of you guys who are looking to create this kind of social impact focus at your hackathons, there's a lot of useful resources. There's a lot of lists of nonprofits that we've kind of cultivated that we'd love to share with you. There's also something that KPCB is actually putting together, the Fellows Challenge. And basically they're going out and speaking to a ton of nonprofits. Ali's actually on the staff working with client sourcing, but they're creating a hub for nonprofits looking for technical projects. So they're going to be talking to Kiva and Pencils of Promise and a lot of other organizations to just have a database ready of hackathon projects that need to be built for social impact. And their goal is to leverage hackathon to be hack days for these nonprofits. And they're going to make sure that the hacks are actually implemented and that the impact actually happens. So that's basically the end of my talk. I want to keep the conversation going, and I want to hear your ideas. Hack for Impact is an organization that we've been running for about a year now. We work with a bunch of different nonprofits. By the end of this semester, we'll have worked with 8. And I think there's a lot of things that people are doing at other schools that are similar. So if anyone's interested in talking more about Hack for Impact, talking more about hackathons, please let me know. For now, we can take some Q&A.
Let's give it up for Drew. Just a slight note on the change of the format for questions. If you have a question, don't shut it out. Make sure you raise your hand. We'll call on you, just so everyone knows. Cool.
Thanks.
And you can be the caller.
Yeah.
Obviously talking to users and finding out their real problems rather than the problems they could have is a challenge in regular settings. How are you guys doing that with Hack for Impact?
Sure. So with Hack for Impact, our projects are actually, sorry. Oh, the question was working with users and getting some user feedback is very important and it's obviously useful, but how is that going to scale for smaller and smaller timeframes? And how are we doing it with Hack for Impact? So for Hack for Impact, we're actually on a semester system. So we work with a nonprofit for the entire semester. So it's a little bit different. I would say for hackathons, that's the importance of having these diverse teams. So what we did was I actually went to one hackathon where we were working on an Alzheimer app, an app for Alzheimer's patients. And my friend's grandpa actually had the disease and he had some insight into how the disease worked. But what we did was we started calling a lot of people that we knew who had friends who had experiences with people with Alzheimer's. And we started collecting this little corpus of knowledge before we started building the app. And I think that's the importance of having such diverse teams. Because if you have a doctor on your team who's worked with Alzheimer's patients, he's going to have 20, 30 case examples that he can use to help drive the direction of the app. I would recommend that probably getting more and more people into the room that are not hackers would be beneficial for that. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay. So you just mentioned that you guys go like it's a semesterly process. How do you guys handle when that breakaway period comes? Like obviously you can't get all these students in indefinite relations with these organizations. How do you set up the breakaway process so that they're not completely destroyed when you take away their whole infrastructure team?
Sure. So that's actually Oh yeah, sorry about that. So the question was, after we finish the Hack for Impact semester projects, what do we do in terms of the breakaway process? So when we hand off the tech project to the nonprofit, how do we ensure that the project just doesn't completely fail and the nonprofit's left with something that doesn't work? So we're kind of working on that. And right now what we're doing is we have a 6-month guarantee. So after we finish the project, let's say we start in January and we're going to finish the product by May. Then we promise as an organization that we're going to work on your product, and in case there's any minor bugs, if it goes down, we're going to be there to fix it for the next 6 months. And we think that this might work because 6 months will give them time to maybe hire a technical person, hire a technical consultant, maybe it's not a full-time staff member, and at least raise some funds from their donors to say, look, we have this product, we just need someone to maintain it. We're kind of in the process of seeing whether that's going to work out. Yeah. So the question was, have these ideas been tested yet? I'd say I've seen some of them implemented and some of them implemented well. So at Google's Hack for Humanity hackathon, what I saw was there was a journalist that came in and talked about how it was very hard to encrypt the voice recordings that he had for the witnesses that he talked to. And it was very, very dangerous because basically if he had these testimonies, they could get in trouble and the journalists wouldn't be happy. And as a result of his experience, a lot of hackathon apps were built based on that journalist experience. And I think he actually took the time to talk to the teams in depth and stayed there for a lot of the hackathon, which I think shows that having more diverse teams helps. In terms of having prizes for longer term things, I'm not really sure. The way it works in Hack for Impact is we focus on creating a really tight-knit community, and we continuously kind of work on the project long-term, and people are very bought into the process. And even by the end, when the project leader says, I think the project's ready to go, I've noticed that developers are still working on it. They're still excited to make these last-minute changes because they know that the last-minute changes are going to make an impact on the user. I think in general, there's something in motivation theory that says if you know who you're helping, you're going to stay motivated. And I think that's the biggest difference between a hackathon project and a long-term social impact project is that the work that you're going to do is actually going to have an impact immediately. Sure.
Cool. So do you have on-site or I guess on-call professional references? So let's say a hacker wanted to work with something in the healthcare industry, but they have no idea about it, and they wanted to call somebody and that's an actual expert in the field. Do you have people that can be on call in the first few hours of a major hackathon so you can just talk to them?
So the question is, do we have people on call as experts at the beginning of each hackathon? So we actually don't run hackathons in Hack for Impact, but I think the idea would be that's kind of what's happening right now. So at Penn Apps, at I think Hack for Duke, they had people who were there at the beginning of the hackathon as like on-call experts. But I think what we're realizing is if they stick around longer, if we can continuously talk to them as we do in Hack for Impact, where we talk to our nonprofit clients every single week, if we can get that feedback and kind of help that drive the direction of our app, the app ends up being more successful. So I think that was the last question. Thanks so much. We're going to be around all day, so just feel free to come talk to us.